I was coming home 3 hours early. We'd had a business trip to a neighboring city. We were supposed to return tomorrow morning, but I was so exhausted that I convinced my boss to let me take the evening train home. All I wanted was to collapse into my bed, bury my face in the pillow, and forget about endless negotiations, numbers, and business dinners. I didn't even warn Mark. I thought I'd surprise him. We'd been seeing so little of each other lately. He was constantly disappearing for work, saying his project was on the home stretch, that just a little more and we'd be living like royalty. I believed him. I was a foolish, trusting wife who thought her marriage was a fortress no one could breach. I opened the door with my key quietly, so as not to wake him if he was already asleep. The hallway light was on. I noticed someone else's purse, small, expensive, made of red leather, one I'd never seen before. I froze for a second. A thought flashed through my mind. Maybe his mom had come over? But his mom never wears red and never leaves her things in the hallway. I took off my shoes and walked into the living room. No one there. But from the bedroom came sounds. Quiet, muffled. Ones I didn't recognize at first. And then I heard his laugh. That familiar, low laugh he only makes when he's truly happy. And a woman's voice also familiar. Very familiar. I'd recognize it out of 1,000. My heart started beating faster, but my feet carried me toward the bedroom on their own. I wasn't sneaking, I walked calmly. The door was slightly ajar, and I saw everything. Mark was lying on our bed, on my pillows, under my favorite blanket, and next to him was her, Anna, my best friend. The friend I'd shared secrets with, who knew my fears and hopes, who drank coffee with me in the mornings and cried on my shoulder when she had problems with her boyfriend. She was lying in his arms, smiling that smile I knew so well. I stood in the doorway and watched them. They didn't notice me. Mark was whispering something in her ear. She was laughing, and that laugh cut through my ears like a knife. I could have screamed. I could have lunged at them with my fists, smashed something, made a scene they'd remember for a long time. But I did none of that. Instead, my brain switched into some strange mode, observer mode. I suddenly saw the picture from the outside. 2 adults hiding in someone else's bedroom, thinking no one would find out. How naive they were. I became curious. How long had this been going on? How many times had I cooked dinner and waited for him to come home from work while he was with her? How many times had I turned down plans with friends to spend the evening with him while he was actually with her? Curiosity overpowered the pain. I just stood and watched the 2 people I loved betray me in the most banal way possible. And suddenly I felt not anger, not hurt. I felt relief. Strange, icy relief. Because in that moment, I realized I no longer had to love them. I no longer had to care about how they felt. I was free. They finally noticed me. Anna shrieked and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Mark whipped around, and I watched his face go white, then red. He opened his mouth but couldn't force out a single word. And I smiled. I smiled my calmest, coldest smile I could muster. I crossed my arms and said, "Go on. Don't be shy. I just want to understand how you do this. It'll come in handy for the divorce." Mark scrambled off the bed, trying to pull on his pants, and stammered, "Sarah, it's not what you think." I laughed. I actually laughed, because in that moment the phrase, "it's not what you think," struck me as the funniest thing in the world. I said, "Oh, I think exactly what I'm seeing. I just want to know how long this has been going on and what other surprises you have in store for me." Anna was silent. She stared at me with wide eyes, and I could see the fear in them. She was afraid of me. Good. I sat down in the armchair in the corner of the bedroom, crossed my legs, and gestured for them to continue. Mark was panicking. He was rambling about it being a mistake, that Anna had just stopped by, that they were discussing my birthday present. Complete nonsense. I listened to him, and with every second it got funnier. He was so pathetic, so predictable. I suddenly realized that all these years I'd been living with a stranger. A man who could lie with such mastery that I believed every word. And Anna. I remembered how many times she'd asked if I was happy in my marriage, if I was tired of Mark. She was testing the waters. She wanted to know if I was ready to give up. But I hadn't given up. I'd been faithful. And this was my reward for loyalty. I stood up, walked to the closet, and opened it. Mark tensed up, thinking I was about to throw something at them. But I just grabbed my robe, slipped it on, and said, "I'm going to the living room." When you're both ready to talk, I'll listen. But keep in mind, I have a voice recorder. I turned it on the moment I walked in. So everything you say will be recorded. I hadn't actually turned on any recorder, but they didn't need to know that. Let them think I was in control. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and headed to the kitchen. I made myself coffee, grabbed a notepad and pen, and started writing. I wrote down everything I'd seen. Details. Their positions, their faces, their words. I wrote down my feelings. I needed to capture this moment before the emotions overwhelmed me. I knew the pain would come, the rage would come, but right now I was absolutely calm. I was like a sniper with a target in my crosshairs, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. And that moment would come, but not today. Today I was just observing. 15 minutes later, they came out of the bedroom. Mark was pale, Anna red-faced from crying. She tried to approach me, but I raised my hand. Stay there. I don't need your closeness. She froze. Mark started making excuses. Sarah, it only happened a few times. I don't know how to explain it. I looked at him and said, you can't lie when you're panicking. Your jaw twitches and you touch your left ear. I always noticed it, but I thought it was just nerves. Now I understand it was your tell. I don't even know if you were ever honest with me at all. He went even paler. He realized I wasn't playing by his rules. Anna suddenly spoke up. She said, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This was a horrible thing to do. But Mark said you didn't understand him, that he was unhappy. I cut her off. Mark lied to you. He lied to me and he lied to you. He's been doing it for years. And if you think he'll leave me for you, you're wrong. He won't leave me because I'm his cash cow. I pay for this house, his car, his business. He can't leave me because without my money, he's nothing. I watched her face change. She didn't know that. She thought Mark was a successful businessman. He was just a salesman of illusions. I took a sip of coffee and added, but now I know the truth, and I'm grateful to you both because you gave me a reason to start a new life without either of you. Mark, I want you to pack your things and go to your mother's or wherever you want. Anna, I want you to disappear from my life forever. If either of you tries to get in my way, I will tear you apart in court. I have proof, I have money, I have a lawyer who will happily make you look like idiots. I stood up, grabbed my cup, and headed to the bedroom to close the door. But before I did, I turned and said, and know this is only the beginning. I don't forgive. I'm just gathering information. Now, get out of my house. They left. Mark was yelling something outside, but I closed the door and locked it. I was alone in an empty house that smelled of them. And that smell was suffocating me. But I didn't let myself break. I threw out his things, his clothes, his cologne. I erased everything that reminded me of him. Then I lay down on the floor in the middle of the living room and stared at the ceiling. And I smiled, because for the first time in years I felt alive. I was no longer his shadow. I was no longer her best friend. I was myself. And I was free. But that was only the first night. I knew a long game lay ahead. And I was going to win it. I wouldn't take revenge immediately. I'd wait. I'd watch, study, and strike when they least expected it. I wanted them to remember this forever. Revenge is a dish best served cold. And I had already started cooking it. The next morning, I woke up with a clear understanding. I wasn't going to just cry and suffer. I was going to gather facts. I was going to dig deep. I was going to know everything they did, when, where, and how. I didn't want to be a victim. I wanted to be a detective in my own case. And I knew I had an advantage. They thought I was weak. They thought I was crushed, that I'd beg Mark to come back, plead with Anna for forgiveness. How wrong they were. My first target was Mark's computer. He was always obsessed with privacy. Changed passwords every week, carried his phone face down, never left his laptop open. But I knew one thing. He used the same password for all his old accounts. Yes, he changed it at work, but I remembered the old one, his favorite football team and birth year. I tried it on his cloud drive, and I got in. Everything was there. Folders with documents, photos, correspondence. I started going through the files, and for the first 10 minutes I couldn't believe my eyes. He wasn't just storing photos with Anna. He was storing their entire correspondence from the last 2 years. 2 years. They'd been lovers for 2 years while I smiled at them over family dinners. While I bought Anna birthday gifts. while she sat in my kitchen drinking my coffee. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a cynical conspiracy. I read hundreds of messages. They discussed me, laughed at my habits, planned how to deceive me. Anna wrote to him, "She's so naive, she'll never figure it out." He replied, "She doesn't need the truth. She needs the illusion of happiness." I read this and felt something boiling inside me, but I held back. I took screenshots, saved every file, every message. I knew these were my trump cards. This wasn't just infidelity. It was preparation for a divorce with complete financial devastation for him. But the most shocking thing I found was in a folder labeled Finances. There were documents explaining why our business had suddenly started making less money. Mark had been transferring funds to accounts registered under shell companies, and one of those companies was registered in Anna's name. She wasn't just sleeping with him. She was his business partner in stealing my own money. Couldn't breathe. I sat there staring at the numbers, and one thought was racing through my mind. They weren't just deceiving me. They were robbing me. They were using my trust and my love to drain money from our family budget. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer, someone I trusted. I said, "I need to meet with you. I have materials that will change everything." He agreed to come over in 2 hours. I printed out all the screenshots, put them in a folder, and hid them in the safe. I knew Mark might come back to get his things, or he might have installed cameras in the house. I was careful. I checked every room for hidden devices. I'd watched too many TV shows to be naive. Fortunately, I found nothing. When the lawyer arrived, I showed him all the evidence. He was silent for a long time, and then he said, "Sarah, this isn't just infidelity. This is grand-scale fraud. If we take this to court, he could go to prison." I thought about it, sending him to prison. But I didn't want that. I wanted him to lose everything, but not his freedom. I wanted him to live and know that I'd beaten him. I asked the lawyer, "Can we make sure he ends up with no money but stays out of prison?" The lawyer nodded. "We can offer him a deal. He admits to all financial violations, returns the money, and waives all rights to the property. Then we don't take it to the prosecutor's office." It was perfect, but I couldn't act immediately. I had to prepare the ground. I had to lull him into complacency so he wouldn't have time to hide or destroy anything. So I did the hardest thing of all. I started acting like nothing had happened. The next day, I wrote to him, "Mark, I've thought it over and decided we should try to save this marriage. Come by tonight, we'll talk." He replied within a minute, "Of course, honey, I'm so glad." I knew he'd lie again, and I was ready. He came with flowers. Roses, the same ones he always gave me when he wanted to hide something. I accepted them, smiled, put them in a vase, and offered him dinner. We sat down at the table, and I listened to his excuses. He said it was a mistake, that Anna had seduced him, that he'd always loved only me. I listened and nodded, and in my head all those messages where he called me a fool were playing on repeat. It took everything in me not to laugh in his face. I said, "I believe you. Let's try to start over." He exhaled in relief. He'd bought it. He thought I was weak, that I'd forgive him. He didn't know I'd already transferred all the money from our joint account to my personal one. He didn't know I'd changed the locks at the office. He didn't know his business partner was already ready to testify against him. For the next 2 weeks, I played the role of a loving wife. I made him breakfast, I smiled, I let him touch me. But every night, after he fell asleep, I sat down at the computer and dug through his documents, finding new evidence, recording conversations. I hired a private investigator to follow him and Anna. I wanted fresh proof if he decided to contest the divorce. The detective sent me photos of their meetings, their kisses in the parking lot. He even caught them on video discussing a plan to withdraw money if I got too suspicious. I watched these videos and felt not pain, I felt adrenaline. This was a game and I was going to win. I knew they had no idea I knew everything. Anna kept texting me, asking how I was doing, inviting me for coffee. I replied, "All good. Busy with work. Let's meet next week." She had no idea I was already talking to her tax consultant, who'd given me a full picture of her finances. She wasn't clean either. I knew if I went after her, she'd lose everything. Her business, her reputation. One day, coming home, I found a card from Anna on the table. She wrote, "Sarah, I miss our conversations. Can we meet up?" I smiled. I wrote back, "Sure. Let's meet tomorrow at the cafe. I set up the meeting. And I knew that at this meeting, I'd turn her world upside down. I wasn't going to scream or threaten. I was going to ask her one question that would make her understand the game was over. When we met, she looked nervous. She thought I suspected her but wasn't sure. I ordered tea, looked her in the eyes and said, "Anna, how do you manage to keep smiling when you know I know everything?" She froze. Her face went pale. She started stammering, "What do you mean?" I calmly took out my phone, showed her screenshots of the messages and photos from the parking lot, and said, "You slept with my husband for 2 years. You participated in his financial schemes. You thought I was stupid. But now I know everything. And I want you to make a choice. You leave his life forever and give a written confession of your actions, or I hand all this over to the tax authorities and the court. Your choice." She burst into tears. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She tried to say something, but I raised my hand. "I'm not going to listen to you. You have 24 hours to decide." I stood up, put a $100 bill on the table and said, "Coffee's on me," and I walked out. I left the cafe and felt lightness. I'd made my first move in this game. I knew this was only the beginning. The hardest part was ahead. But I was ready. I was like a chess player who sees 10 moves ahead. Mark and Anna didn't understand that they'd awakened something in me I didn't know existed. They'd awakened a predator. And now I was going hunting. Over the next 24 hours, I didn't sit idle. I knew Anna was weak. She'd break first. She'd already cried at the cafe, which meant she was afraid. And fear is the best tool for control. I waited for her call, and it came exactly 16 hours later. She spoke quietly, her voice strained. "Sarah, I agree. I'll write whatever you want. Just don't destroy my life." I asked, "Are you ready to confess to everything? To the fact that you and Mark funneled money through your accounts?" She was silent for a few seconds, and then said, "Yes, I'll sign anything." I was satisfied. One of my enemies had surrendered. Now for the main one, Mark. I met Anna the next day at my lawyer's office. She sat across from me, pale and trembling. The lawyer laid out documents in front of her. A confession of financial violations and a commitment to return all funds she'd received through shell companies. She signed them without even looking. I asked, "Are you ready to testify against Mark in court if needed?" She looked up at me and slowly nodded. She knew I could destroy her, and she chose to save herself. I didn't feel hatred toward her. I felt pity. She was just as much a victim of his manipulations as I was. She'd just chosen the other side, and now she'd have to pay for it. But I wasn't going to stop with just Anna. I had other cards to play. Through my private investigator, I found out that Mark was planning to transfer the remaining money to an offshore account. He wanted to hide assets before I filed for divorce. But I was already one step ahead. I'd notified the bank in advance that all transactions on our joint accounts required my approval. I put a freeze on all large transfers. Now he couldn't make a move without my knowledge. I knew he'd be furious when he found out, and I was ready for his anger. The moment of truth came 3 days later. I came home and found him in the kitchen. He was standing there with his phone in his hand, looking like he'd been hit over the head. He turned to me and shouted, "What did you do to my accounts? Why can't I withdraw money?" I calmly walked to the table, sat down and said, "Mark, sit down. We need to talk." He didn't move. So I took the folder with documents out of my bag and placed it on the table in front of him. "It's all here. Your messages with Anna, financial statements, transfers to accounts registered in her name. And here are photos of the two of you kissing taken 2 weeks ago. Remember, back then you told me you were working late. I know everything, Mark. I know you've been lying to me for 2 years. That you were stealing from our joint business. That you were planning to leave me with nothing and run away with her." He went pale. His hands were shaking. He opened the folder and started flipping through the documents, and I watched his face change. First disbelief, then horror, then rage. He screamed, "You were spying on me. You hired a private investigator." I calmly answered, "I was protecting myself, and now I have 2 options for you. First, you agree to a divorce with a settlement where all property stays with me. You waive all rights to the house, the business, and the car. You return all the stolen money within a month. If you do that, I won't hand the evidence to the prosecutor, and you avoid criminal prosecution." I paused and added, Second option. I hand all these documents to the court and tax authorities. You lose not only money and reputation, you lose your freedom. You'll go to prison, Mark. I'm not joking. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He realized that his naive, kind wife had turned into someone he feared. He tried to flash his usual charming smile. Sarah, this is insane. We can work this out peacefully, we're family. I looked him straight in the eye and said, Family? You betrayed this family when you slept with my best friend. You betrayed this family when you stole the money I earned for us. We don't have a family anymore. There's only a legal procedure. You choose now or I choose for you. He stood there silent. I could see him running through the options in his head. He thought I might still forgive him, but I looked at him with cold calm, and he realized I wasn't backing down. He muttered, I agree to the first option. I'll sign everything. I pulled out the second copy of the agreement, already prepared by my lawyer, and placed it in front of him. He signed it with a trembling hand. I took the document, stood up and said, You have 2 weeks to move out of this house. I want every single thing of yours gone by then. If anything remains, I'll throw it away. And one more thing, don't try to contact Anna. She's already given a statement against you, and I can use it at any moment. You're free, but remember, I can destroy your life at any second if I want to. He left that same night. I heard him packing, heard the front door slam. I was alone. I lay down on the sofa, closed my eyes, and finally let myself breathe. I'd done it. I'd won. I hadn't become a victim. I'd become a victor. But inside me, a storm of emotions was still raging. Pain, anger, loneliness, it was all there. I cried. I cried not because of him, but because of how long I'd closed my eyes to the truth, how I'd let myself be deceived, how I'd loved someone who wasn't worth my love. But the tears didn't last long. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself and said aloud, You're strong. You made it. Now a new life begins. A month later, I moved into a new house, one I'd bought with the money I'd recovered from Mark. It was a small, cozy cottage by the lake. I sold the old house, leaving Mark with what he'd earned from years of lies. Practically nothing. Anna disappeared from our lives. I heard she moved to another city and started over from scratch. I wasn't angry at her. I just let her go. I focused on myself. I started going to the gym, traveling, writing books. I found myself again. I met new people who didn't know my story, and they saw me not as a victim, but as a strong woman. And you know what? I'm grateful to both of them, Mark and Anna. If they hadn't betrayed me, I never would have woken up. I never would have realized I could stand on my own 2 feet without him. I never would have known how much I could achieve when no one was trying to control me. Now, when I look back, I don't feel anger. I feel pride. Pride that I didn't break, that I turned betrayal and deception into a launching pad for a new, better life. Every morning I wake up with a smile. I sit on the porch, drink coffee, and watch the lake. And I think about how much we lose when we cling to people who don't value us. But life always gives us a second chance, we just have to see it. The betrayal opened my eyes, and now I see the world more clearly than ever. I want to say to everyone listening to this story, if you've faced betrayal, don't let it destroy you. Use it as fuel. Turn your pain into strength. Find the energy within yourself to stand up and keep moving forward. Because on the other side of that journey, freedom is waiting for you. Freedom to be yourself. Freedom from empty promises. Freedom to live for yourself. I don't forgive them. I just stopped thinking about them. I let them go, not for their sake, but for mine. And if you're going through something similar right now, remember, you're not alone. And you can come out of this stronger. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, even when it seems like there's nothing but darkness. Thank you for being with me through this story. If it resonated with you, hit that like button. It lets me know these topics matter. Drop a comment. What would you have done in my shoes? And of course, subscribe. We'll meet again to discuss life's most unexpected twists. Until next time.